you're already for the second or third edition or for paperback, you've got a whole chapter on Kyler Murray's statement that I'm holding up right here, I imagine.
Well,
right?
I think the statement itself would be a whole chapter.
What gives?
Hopefully in larger print.
How did this one hit you, Mike?
Well, it doesn't surprise me because I think the subtext of what happened with Kyler Murray 3 weeks ago when he scrubbed the Cardinals from his social media pages, which has great significance to 24-year-olds because that's how they communicate and that's how they send messages. And then the report from Chris Mortensen from Super Bowl Sunday citing an unnamed source or unnamed sources that regard Murray as self-centered, finger-pointing, and immature. I think that this is part of the broader back and forth aimed at sending messages about the amount of money that's ultimately going to be available to Kyler Murray. And I think that Murray's agent understands / believes that whether it's chatter about Murray maybe not being the ideal quarterback, although plenty of quarterbacks, if they're in a situation where things aren't going their way, will come off as self-centered, finger-pointing, and immature, like Tom Brady when things aren't going his way. But Eric Burkhart represents both Murray and Cliff Kingsbury. Both guys are in line for new contracts. With Kingsbury, after the season ended, there was some chatter that Michael Bidwell, the owner of the team, was livid, and there was talk that maybe Kingsbury would be out. And I think Burkhart didn't react to that well. And when he controls the relationships with both guys and they're sort of tied together, I think this all comes down to money. And I think that's why his message was, let's have actions, not words. And maybe those reports we saw about Kingsbury, about Murray, trace back to an effort by the Cardinals to position this in a way that doesn't entail shattering the piggy bank the way that Burkhart may want them to.
Well, I mean, but how does it, any agent knows it's about contractual control, and other than making things uncomfortable for a little bit more uncomfortable than it might already have been for Cliff Kingsbury and Steve Keim when they have their combine appearances on Tuesday at 1:45 and 3 p.m. local time, respectively. What does this accomplish? What does this accomplish at all?
Well, it doesn't accomplish anything. It's just part of the posturing that sometimes is engaged in to involve the public and the media in setting the stage for whatever the number is going to be. I don't know what Eric Burkhart wants for Kyler Murray. I don't know what he wants for Cliff Kingsbury. But when you look at how the team went from 10-2 to 1-and-done in the postseason, halfway through the year, we're looking at Murray as the MVP. We're looking at the Cardinals as the best team in the NFL, and they fell apart. And for 9 straight seasons, Kingsbury as a head coach at Texas Tech for 6 years and 3 seasons with the Cardinals. He's had good, great starts, and he's tailed off down the stretch. Now, you can also say, well, his team's ultimately gotten better each year in Arizona, and that's accurate, but it doesn't change the fact that he tends to flame out. The rest of the league tends to catch up with him as the season goes on, and the same is true of Kyler Murray. And that ankle injury he suffered Week 8, the Thursday night game against the Packers, that came down to that throw to A.J. Green when A.J. Green didn't know the throw was coming his way, and they could have won that game if A.J. Green makes that catch. That's when Murray suffered the ankle injury. The play before that, and I don't think he was the same all season long. He definitely wasn't the same guy in the playoff game. He had 2 carries for 6 yards. So this is about figuring out what the right number is. Hey, it's one thing to say we're going to give you a contract, but how much are we going to pay you? Are you going to be getting $40 million a year? Or are you going to be getting $30 million a year? That's a big difference. And I think that the Cardinals are going to try to push toward the lower end of that, and Burkhart is going to try to push his guy toward the higher end of that. And the question is, can they find a middle ground before we get to the start of a season where he's due to make, I think, $5.5 million in total compensation?
Well, that's a number that's not even remotely close to his level of play or his value. I mean, that's
the same is true for Lamar Jackson. He didn't get a contract. Different circumstance, though. Jackson represents himself and wouldn't engage the Ravens. The Ravens would have done something if they could have gotten Lamar Jackson's attention. So this year the question is, you've got an agent who's engaged. You've got a team that is interested. Can you get the 2 circles of the Venn diagram to come together? That's going to be the challenge for both sides as we go forward.
Mike Florio here on the Rich Eisen Show. So he's not going to be available, right? Like, this quarterback carousel is not going to involve number one, despite, by the way, excellent stationery, and despite this statement, right? Like, he's not this is not going to happen.
Does any quarterback have a good personal logo?
I don't know.
So many of them have personal logos. I don't like any of them.
Really? You don't like the TB12?
I don't like the TB12.
Okay.
I guess you get used to it because you see it everywhere.
Yes.
But like the Russell Wilson logo, not good. Just the logos aren't good. Whatever they're paying, and they're probably paying a lot to some graphic designer to come up with these things, they're just not getting the bang for their buck. Anyway.
So then let's get to the quarterback carousel here. Mike Florio on the Rich Eisen Show on the Mercedes-Benz Vans phone line. So what does the quarterback carousel look like? Does it involve Kyler Murray, or this just is not going to deteriorate unless we're a couple statements away from that? What do you think?
Anybody that would want him is going to have to be ready to give him what he wants financially and give the Cardinals what they would want. So I think that complicates things. And I don't know who out there would be clamoring to make him one of the highest-paid quarterbacks in football and give the Cardinals whatever it would take to make it happen. You have to be willing to listen to anyone who calls you and makes you an offer. Every player that you have in a contract, that contract is an asset that you can flip into something that may be more. And if you don't view this guy as one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL and someone else does, and they're willing to pay him accordingly and pay you accordingly, you have to at least listen. I'd be surprised if it happens, though, and I think there's a lot of people out there who just would not want Kyler Murray to be their quarterback at all. That's something Sims has said on PFT Live, and I agree with him. There's just, he's too short for some coaches. For others, he's not, but for some, they're just going to say, no, it's a non-starter. And when you take away the running ability, he looks even shorter than he is, because then he's stuck back there in the pocket and he's trying to find his way through the throwing lanes. And if he's not going to pull down the ball and take off with it, it's not that same level of threat that we've seen when he's at his best. So I don't think he's going to be on the carousel, but all it takes is one team to contact the Cardinals and say, hey, we're willing to give this guy what you're not, and we're willing to give you a lot to make it happen, and let's do something. The Cardinals would have to at least take it seriously, but I'd be stunned if it happens. It'd have to be so much. And, as a practical matter, if you're going to trade for somebody, what you have to give up to get him from another team and what you have to give up to get him on a contract, that's a sliding scale. And the more you pay the player, the less you want to give up in draft pick compensation. The more you give up in draft pick compensation or player contracts, the less you want to pay. I just think it would be too hard to pull it off, and I just don't think we're even going to go there. I'd like to think this ends with an acceptable contract for Kyler Murray, but we'll see. There's going to be more huffing and puffing before they sit down and work this thing out.
Hey, you watched all the way to the end. Thanks for that. Watch more right here.